You can't do it alone. You need to call the National Treatment Advisors. They'll immerse you into a 30-day program to replace your old habits with new habits and totally change your life. And if you have PPO private health insurance, the entire program may be covered. Fix your problem right now before it gets any worse. Get clean. Call now and learn more. 877-247-1581. 877-247-1581. 877-247-1581. Fast Track Student Loans can get your student loans out of default, stop any wage garnishments, stop collection calls, and stop seizure of your tax refund. Give yourself a break. Stop the stress and get your student loan payments down to as little as $25 a month based on what you can afford to pay. 800-709-4395. 800-709-4395. 800-709-4395. 800-709-4395.
Attention all business owners and creative minds. Do you need a unique and personalized touch for your products? Look no further than Romika Laser Engraving and Custom Designs. I'm Ron Phillips, co-owner of Romika Designs. We offer custom laser engraving services for a variety of products, including promotional items and corporate or personal gifts. With state-of-the-art equipment and a team of skilled designers, we can engrave intricate designs on virtually any material. Whether it's a special message, a company logo, or a custom design, Romika Laser Engraving will help you make your mark. And the best part, our prices are affordable and our turnaround time is quick.
I couldn't be happier with the work Romika Laser Engraving did for me. The engraving on my product was precise and exactly what I wanted.
So don't wait any longer to add a personal touch to your products. Call Romika Laser Engraving and Custom Designs today at 817-400-4040 or visit our website at romikadesigns.com. We look forward to helping you make your mark.
Fast Track Student Loans can get your student loans out of default, stop any wage garnishments, stop collection calls, and stop seizure of your tax refund. Give yourself a break. Stop the stress and get your student loan payments down to as little as $25 a month based on what you can afford to pay. 800-709-4395. 800-709-4395. 800-709-4395. 800-709-4395.
Good evening, Johnson County, and welcome to this week's episode of The Breakdown. I'm your host, Greg Cooper, and here on The Breakdown, we deep dive local politics, mainly school boards and city councils, but any and all Johnson County politics are on the table. We air most Thursdays at 5 p.m. You can visit the JoCo Community Radio Facebook page to watch shows live or to see replays. Also, you can go to www.jococommunityradio.com, where Apple and Android apps are available. Tune in to get the ins and outs of Johnson County, Texas. Before we get into today's topic of discussion, I have the distinct pleasure of introducing our guest today, Mr. Matthew Lucci. Today, we're lucky to have Matthew Lucci. He's running for Congress, the Texas 25th House District, to be exact. Mr. Lucci strongly believes in returning the local to all politics and issues, and although his ultimate goal is to represent the U.S., us, in the United States House of Representatives as a congressman, he does not shy away from local issues and strongly champions true conservative values. We're blessed to have him today. You can learn more about Matthew Lucci and what he stands for at Lucci, Lucci, for Texas.com. That's LUCCI 4 spelled out FOR Texas.com. And on Facebook, Matthew Lucci for Congress. Mr. Lucci, he's fresh off his recent Take Our Country Back tour. Mr. Lucci, welcome to The Breakdown tonight. You're a regular guest on JoCo Community Radio. I've had you once before, and it was a distinct pleasure. tell us how your recent tour went and how the campaign's going before we get into tonight's topic, sir.
Yeah, Greg, it's always great to be on Joco Community Radio, and an honor to be on this show with someone like yourself. One of the things that you just brought up there was that I got back from a 12-day Take Our Country Back tour. The 25th Congressional District includes the vast majority of Johnson County, as well as all are part of 12 other counties. So that's 13 counties that we went to in 12 days. We crisscrossed Johnson County from Joshua, Burleson to Cleburne, out to Rio Vista, and then we went out all the way to Breckenridge, Texas, all the way to Olney, to Comanche. We went all over this great state of Texas, all over the 13 counties in the 25th Congressional District. We were talking to anyone from school administrators and teachers to parents who were dealing with issues of bullying of their children in schools, to law enforcement. Heck, we even talked to some people who were reformed drug dealers, talked to them about their stories and how they used to sell drugs to their neighbor and into schools even. And a lot of that was very eye-opening to me, about how much people, especially after something like that, they care about building up their local community and starting to do what's right. Another thing that I've noticed and really just reinforced every single place we went was how abandoned we all feel here in Texas by our elected officials. Whether it's at the local level, in many cases with ISDs, and we're going to be getting into that quite a bit today on the show, or whether it's in Washington, D.C. They can't get their act together long enough to do the people's business, but yet they want to be the ones who control every aspect of our lives.
Well, and having said that, you crisscrossed all of Johnson County and other counties in the 25th House District. How many people did you come across that have actually spoken to and met and had Roger Williams, who you're vying for his seat?
Mm-hmm.
How many of them had actually heard from him, and has he been involved with any of their local issues?
Yeah, there's only a handful of people, and we met well over 2,000 people in 2 weeks. We shook over 2,000 hands. We passed out thousands of cards. We knocked on 1,000 or more doors in that 2-week period, in addition to meeting people at festivals. And the thing is, the vast majority of people did not know who their current congressman was. And those that did were not happy. And one of the biggest reasons was he voted against the border wall back in 2019. And, for those in Arlington, he endorsed an Arlington mayoral candidate who, within a month of getting reelected, hosted, and he went on stage, a drag time story hour drag show that was quote unquote family friendly, that was definitely not family friendly, on the lawn of City Hall in Arlington.
Unbelievable.
That is someone he endorsed, saying this is that the incumbent I'm running against said was a man of family values. So there was a lot of people across this district who are very upset with our current congressman. And then on the other hand, we've got folks that I've talked to in several of these sheriff's offices that we visited throughout the district, who have told me they have never heard from the incumbent Roger Williams. One of the guys has been a sheriff since 2009, and Roger Williams has never reached out to him. He's been invited to many things that they were doing in the county. He's never showed up, never answered a call, never gotten on a call with them, never emailed them back. And that is a common story we're hearing across the district, whether we're talking about local school boards trying to reach out and get help from the congressional level, or even people who were trying to have their passports processed in a timely manner. I mean, people over the summer were putting on Twitter and Facebook in his comment section, "Hey, I've been trying to get a hold of your office. I really need to get my passport processed." And so what I would do is I would DM them and I would say, "Look, I know that you're having trouble. I know
Good
I'm
for
not the
you.
elected official. Here's the path you go through. And if you need an elected official who is actually going to pick up the phone and do something about it, I'm not in there yet, but here are a few congressmen that I usually send people to, even if they're not your congressman, they will pick up the phone and they will work on your behalf.
I spoke at an event that Roger Williams was at, and it was at the Godly Chamber of Commerce a couple years back. And the superintendent of Godly ISD was there, Rich Deere, and some of the school board trustees. And I specifically asked him, what at the federal level is he doing to mitigate the federal overreach for critical race theory and social emotional learning and how it's impacting schools? And he flat out said, you guys are lucky and godly that you have Rich Deere, who doesn't promote this, while we were fighting the school board, because in the 8th grade curriculum that they had just recently brought in, they were actually having people choose their gender. And then the whole critical race theory, there was numerous Black Lives Matter, social justice stuff in the videos. He didn't even have a clue. He just made the assumption that people in his district, that stuff's not encroaching. And it's really, really, really sad.
And it is, but you also have to consider the fact, who did he endorse in that Arlington mayor's race?
There you go. Maybe he likes it.
And then 2, you also have to look at his voting record and see that he voted to enhance, quote unquote, diversity, equity, inclusion in the workplace. And if you hang around long enough in the comments, we'll post that
Fair
vote in the comments of this on Facebook over the break here, so that people can look and see that the guy I'm running against, Roger Williams, voted for diversity, equity, and inclusion. So,
and if that's your thing, then, hey, status quo, vote for it. But if you want change, there's your man.
Yeah. And another thing is, if you're going to be a congressman, don't come and act like you believe one thing.
There you go.
And say that you're in support of one thing, and then go vote in an entirely different way.
Yeah. So, I'm glad your Take Your Country Back tour went good. And once again, LUCCI4FOR Texas.com, or on Facebook, Matthew Lucci for Congress, if you are interested in this candidate and him trying to bring some of the local back. But today we're talking about public schools and bonds. And we're titling today's show, Have Public Schools Become a Modern Day Idol? And is bond debt the funding mechanism? So, to set the table, and before we get into the nuts and bolts regarding bonds, we all need to really take a long, hard look at ourselves and what society and parents and taxpayers have allowed the public school system to metastasize into. It has completely overstepped its original mandates, and it's grown into such a large behemoth that would you agree with that? What are your thoughts on how it's gotten away from just the core solid foundational education and grown into and we'll get into specifics later, but into this massive behemoth that's just sucking taxpayer money at an alarming rate, from the individual taxpayers?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you and I can definitely agree that our current school system has just ballooned. It's gotten enormous. They're taking cues from the higher education system, where in order to attract students, you have to add all these random amenities. The school I went to had a rock climbing wall, for crying out loud. And I didn't feel like, as I was working 3 jobs and tutoring on the side to be able to afford to go there, that was a really good use of the money that I was paying to that school to be able to go and get that degree. I'm also somebody who has volunteered in a lot of our local school districts to teach kids how to read who were 2 or 3 years behind reading level. And so I go in and I see these, in many cases, nice fancy schools with, I'm sure, a bunch of administrators.
Sure. We'll talk about that here in a bit.
And then you've got these students who can't even read at their reading level.
When state testing, which is basically the state's report card, are you guys doing your job? When they have to create a category called approaching the standard, and that's considered passing when you're actually just moving towards. Well, the day I was born, I was moving towards being able to read. The day I was born, I'm moving in that direction. So it's gotten way out of hand. And once again, our episode's titled "Have Public Schools Become a Modern Day Idol?" and is bond debt the funding mechanism. So I looked up idolatry and what is idolatry, and it's pretty simple. And we're going to ask some hard questions after this, but idolatry is exceeding or more than just, usual, or suitable bounds regarding the immoderate or out of proportion attachment or devotion to something. So, and it's funny as people go back and forth about schools and where they sit, they end up falling into these absolutes.
Mhm.
And people that are siding with the school districts, it doesn't matter what they do, it doesn't matter how they overstep, it doesn't matter how what overreach they go to. They champion because it's the idea, because they're living in the world of absolutes and they're not capable of taking these individual issues. And the reality is, regarding public schools and school bonds, at some point we need to have a really, really uncomfortable conversation, and we're going to start that today. And so what exactly is the basic fundamental role of the public school system? I'll throw that to you. So what's the basic role of the public school system?
The basic role of the public school system is to educate our kids and get them prepared for life and their careers. Everything beyond that is the role of the parents and the family. Um, School system, educate the kids, family, everything else.
And I agree with that. And before you even consider moving on from beyond that foundational, solid, base of knowledge, you have to succeed at that.
Exactly.
Before you can go beyond that, you have to be doing that really, really, really well. You have to master the basics and the fundamentals.
Schools cannot be the jack of all trades, master of none. They
Absolutely
have
not.
a
I have
mission.
that quoted later.
They have a mission to be the master of one thing, and that is educate the children on the basics and help get them prepared for their next step in life.
So the next question, and it kind of rolls right up from that one, is the public school system taking on too great of a responsibility and too big of a role?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
They are trying to do everything under the sun when they, like you were mentioning, the vast majority of our public schools, and the reason why we're calling them failing public schools is because kids can't read up to grade level.
Right.
Kids, when they graduate and they go into one of my classes, because I teach mechanical engineering at one of the universities, when they come in there and they cannot do calculus in an engineering course,
That's right.
that becomes a problem. And that tells me that a lot of our public schools are failing to prepare these kids for where they're going. But, some of them are like, okay, we had a really good football team. Great. Did you get a football scholarship?
And we're
No.
and I played football for a national contender for a lot of my high school. And you know what? I don't look back at my football career as like the defining moment of my life. And we shouldn't try to create that environment for our children. And the focus on athletics and some of that stuff is way, way out of control. And so, but at the same time, we're here poking at the public school system, but us as a people, us as parents, grandparents, citizens, and taxpayers, we need to take a long look at ourselves. Are we expecting and demanding too much of the public schools? Are we throwing some of our responsibilities onto the public schools? And I say, yeah. And we need to take a long, hard look at that, I think, and we need to take some of that back into our purview. What do you say to that?
Yeah, Greg, I think I agree with you on that. It's just become so normal for the public schools to do this. And okay, well, what if we put something else in there? What if we put something else in there? When really we should be expecting our public schools to teach the core courses, and in some cases, some advanced courses that kids want to take and that parents want their kids to be taking, so long as we can make sure that the basic curriculum is being met and all the kids are learning that. But right now we have parents who, and us as citizens, we're expecting these schools to be teaching 30 or 40 different things that are really outside of their
Absolutely.
pure purview. We're expecting them to be a jack of all trades and a master of all trades when you cannot be a master of
No,
everything. You need
you
to choose a
can't.
handful of things, if that you can be better than anyone else at, and do those things. And in this case, the thing that they just need to be better than not going to public school at is, math, science, reading, English, social studies, the basic core curriculum. And then we can talk about adding any other career
Technical
courses.
education. We're going to get into
Yeah.
the CTE, this career technical education, and how the school districts really benefit from that big cash cow. And that's what it is. It's a big cash cow. There's value in these programs, but how the school districts are driving kids into this program is a big, big problem. And the reality also is that, you know what, the public schools they've led us astray. They present these big, grandiose and opulent schools, and roughly 2/3 of our property taxes are actually going to the public schools. And the amount of money and the drain on the individual taxpayer and property owner, it's absolutely out of control. And we're paying for things that go well beyond are such overreach beyond this core foundational, fundamental educational values.
Yeah.
And we talked a little bit about the role of public schools. We've talked a little bit about looking in the mirror at ourselves. And we also, we're here, and Christianity plays a big role in a lot of Texans' lives. And us as Christians, we need to really, really ask ourselves, have we unknowingly absolved our biblical responsibility to raise our children? Are we absolving ourselves of that? Are we removing that responsibility, whether intentionally, knowingly or not, and giving it to the public schools with the mental health pieces, the behavioral health pieces? Heck, there's some programs that are doing medical care, doing every aspect of life in the public schools, and even driving into a lot of ideological stuff. And what is your thoughts on that? Are we not taking control of our parental responsibilities?
Yeah, I think one of the things that my parents did when they started having us as kids is look out at the public school system and ask, all right, where are we going to educate our kids? How are we going to educate our kids? And I grew up in Venus, Texas, where the public school system was not great. And my mom, who had taught preschool up to that point, decided I'm going to take it upon myself to educate my kids, to make sure that they get a solid, biblically based education, that my kids have at least a standard of education. And so they took it on themselves, my mom and my dad together, to educate myself and my 6 brothers and sisters. It sounds like the beginning of an old folk song. But I would say they did fairly well with us. And one of the things that they were able to do was tailor the educational experience to each one of us 7. My sister didn't want to learn how to read. She had no interest in it, but she loved horses. And so my mom decided to get her a whole bunch of books on horses at different reading levels. And so as she read more, she could learn more about what she really loved.
Sure.
You can't really do that in a public school. And so trying to say it's 100% the public school's fault that, kids can't read when there's no engagement in the home afterward is just, again, shirking our biblical responsibility.
Absolutely.
And what I've seen is there are a lot of attacks, especially from national political figures, on homeschooling, or also questioning anything that's going on in the school system, saying parents don't have any right to know what's going on in there. We need to, and they're asking for the normalization of basically this black box of education where students come in and then educated and or indoctrinated students come out.
That's right.
And what parents and we as citizens need to be able to do is look at what's going on inside that black box, and also as taxpayers and parents of students who are in those schools have the ability to tweak those knobs when we want something better coming out the other side.
Absolutely. And so we're wrapping up our public schools and modern day idols. The entire second half is going to be devoted towards bonds. We're going to talk about bonds and some of the dangers of them and some of the hidden traps and why they're asking for so much money. But we're going to go over just a few things that have gotten us to this point before we get to our break. So I'm going to cite a source here. It's the Center for Education Policy, and it really drives trends in the public education center. And in the mid 20th century, a drastic change occurred. And this is a quote. And they shifted and they began promoting equity for all. And that became the preeminent mission of public schools in the mid 20th century. And the question is, equity and equality are two very different things. One is everybody has equal access and equal opportunity to achieve an equal level of success. And the other one is a limited number of resources get pushed and flexed to individuals based on things they didn't control and sets them up differently than other people's. They do not equate to equal outcomes. They just don't. Um, and in the 21st century, the same source, Center for Education Policy, had another drastic change. A goal for the public education in the 21st century has shifted from providing access for all to ensuring that all students receive a high quality education. Well, who doesn't want their kid to receive a high quality education? The question is, by bringing in this equity piece and removing the equality from it, we're not actually providing a high quality education. What we're doing is we're lowering the educational outcomes to be equal across the board.
I mean, I would even say it's not even equal across the board. What you're trying to do is you're trying to squish down everybody's economic and educational opportunity enough where you can't really see the differences, but you're punishing the best students the most.
Absolutely.
Punishing everyone across the board, but you're punishing the best students the most, so that your outcome, instead of one student being able to read and perform at a college level and one student still being able to perform at the 6th or 7th grade level, now everyone is down at 3 and 4.
Absolutely.
But you could say, okay, well, 3 and 4, those are close enough. That's equity, guys. When actually what's happening is you're just lowering everybody's ceiling for how far they could go in life.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you know, I've never taught. I've spent a lot of time inside the public schools volunteering and private schools volunteering now, and I see what they do on a daily basis. I can't do that job. I don't have the temperament for it. I don't have a way with children for it. So I ultimately and overwhelmingly respect what they do. And if I was a teacher, seeing the trends and how this is going, and seeing bonds come in with these inflated massive amounts of burden that is placed on taxpayers, teachers is where we need the individual teacher, and being educated and having their individual resources to teach is absolutely, we can't lose track of where we can actually affect some positive change here. And I'm bringing up teachers because between 2000 and 2017, and current day stats are hard to find. So it's really hard to find these trends, but teachers increased by 7.7% nationally. Principals and assistant principals increased by 33.4%. And admin staff, administration staff, that's your high level people that are making these decisions, 74.9%. Teachers need to have the resources given to them, and this bloated top heavy entities that create a bureaucratic nightmare and layers and layers and layers of redundancy, because they all have to make a name for themselves, and they just burden the teachers with this redundancy. The reality is principals don't educate, admin staff don't educate, and bonds don't educate. Teachers, the frontline educators, are the one who's educate. And so many of these trends are pulling away from that. What say you?
Yeah. Keep in mind, public schools are government schools, and government only gets bigger. It only gets more bloated. It only hires on more people to push paperwork and not actually achieve the goals that we as tax-paying citizens send them there to do. And we send our kids to public schools so that they can learn. We pay taxes to public schools so that our kids can be educated. That's not what's happening here. Clearly, we're just hiring on more and more paper pushers who are making some pretty bad policy decisions in a lot of these schools, when what we need is a much more lean federal government, much more lean state government, and a much more lean local school district as
that
well.
Focuses on the basics, laser-like, narrow focused on those foundational core values. Get this bond debt out of here, get this bloat out of here, and get the overreaching jack of all trades mentality out of here. We'll be back with Mr. Lucci to talk bonds as soon as we're done. Thanks for being on the breakdown.
Hey, travelers, do you want to save money on your next flight? Then pick up the phone and call. That's right, call. Because the best prices are not online. They're with SmartFares. See, SmartFares has special deals with the airlines. When they have unsold seats, they use SmartFares to fill them. So you get airline tickets at ridiculously low prices. Our prices are too low to publish online. With the extra money you'll save, you can book another trip or treat yourself to dinner or shopping. So stop searching all of those travel sites to find the lowest price on your next flight. Let one of our SmartFares expert travel agents find ridiculously low prices for you. Call SmartFares today and get the best price on your next flight. Guaranteed. Also, save up to 50% off business and first class tickets.
855-325-1820. 855-325-1820. That's 855-325-1820.
Fast Track Student Loans can get your student loans out of default, stop any wage garnishments, stop collection calls, and stop seizure of your tax refund. Give yourself a break. Stop the stress and get your student loan payments down to as little as $25 a month based on what you can afford to pay. 800-709-4395. 800-709-4395. 800-709-4395. 800-709-4395. Fast Track Student Loans can get your student loans out of default, stop any wage garnishments, stop collection calls, and stop seizure of your tax refund. Give yourself a break. Stop the stress and get your student loan payments down to as little as $25 a month based on what you can afford to pay. 800-709-4395. 800-709-4395. 800-709-4395. 800-709-4395.
Welcome back to the breakdown. We're here with Matthew Lucci, vying for a congressional seat, the Texas 25th House District. You can find more about this hopefully future congressman by going to Lucci, LUCCI, 4FOR, Texas.com, or on Facebook, Matthew Lucci for Congress on Facebook. And before we get into the bond part and the career technical education part of our show, I'd like to remind you that JOCO Community Radio is proud to be the voice of Johnson County, Texas, and is live 24/7 on the TuneIn Radio Network. TuneInJoco.com is a place to find all the ways to listen and watch, and the station app is also available for free on Android and Apple devices. Simply search your store. Check out our lineup and more at www.jococommunityradio.com. This episode and more brought to you by Next Level Claims, making your insurance work for you. Reach out to your Texas sales rep at 844-TEX-HAIL. That's 844-839-4245. And be sure to dress your arms and more at thetiffy.com. And this weather coming up, you guys can use some of that tiffy.com stuff to keep you warm and nice and cozy. We got a cold front, thank goodness, coming in next week. So we're getting ready to dive into the bond process here and discuss how an ISD gets to the point that they feel it's necessary to ask for hundreds of millions of dollars and finance that over 30 years in amounts to bond debt. And the reality is this is the process from idea to bond election. It's very algorithmic. It's tried and true. There's so much money in these bonds that there's a playbook that the average district follows. And most people are in an echo chamber in their little community, and they're keeping it local, and they don't realize that this playbook and this process is flexed across the state by massive architectural companies, developing companies, construction companies that are profiting just hundreds of millions of dollars off the massive amounts of bond debt. There's just too much money to be made in this process for an ISD and these architects and developers to not set the conditions beforehand to obtain a predetermined outcome. So fiscal year 2022, the total bond debt in the state of Texas, this doesn't include the most recent bond elections from May 23, are the ones on the ballot here, but just for ISDs, just for school districts was $104 billion. And that's per the Texas Bond Review Board. That's a government watchdog site that is the government puts it on to let us know how much debt we have. And so we're going to talk about how does an ISD go from where it is to having a bond on the ballot. What's the process? So before we get into this process, how do you feel about that kind of debt? And I know you worked a little bit with Godly ISD's massive $889 million bond, and you're looking at bonds now. How do you feel about this kind of debt and what we get for our bang for our buck as a taxpayer?
Oh, it's an insane amount of debt. I mean, I was speaking with Texas Agricultural Commissioner Sid Miller last week about the size of his budget. His budget is $6 billion a year, which is an enormous figure. It's larger than the state budgets of 31 other states, and 100 billion, essentially $98 billion more than his budget.
It's crazy.
Is how much that the state collectively owes in debt for its ISDs. It's an insane amount of money. And as we go and we talk about where this money's coming from, it's coming out of our pockets. It's coming out of our small businesses. It's coming out of our communities and being put into buildings that in many cases, they'll take 30, 40, 50 years to pay off with all of the interest, because by the end of this $104 billion, it's going to turn into closer to $200 billion by the time just this is paid off. If we do not add another cent in debt,
Absolutely.
this will balloon due to the interest to almost double what it is today.
Absolutely. So how does an ISD go from saying, you know what, we need to build something, to getting to where there's an actual measure on a ballot to where people can vote for it? And it all starts with the school board establishing what is called a long range facility planning committee. And they determine long range, what type of facilities are needed. And it's very important to understand that there's so much at stake here. There's so much money, and careers of senior administration individuals are on the hook for the outcome of this. To think that this is not a hand selected committee with a predetermined outcome is absolutely super ignorant to not think that. Now, I don't mean that they go out and choose 100% people that are going to align with them, but they stack the deck proportionally to where they're going to get their predetermined outcome. And everybody that has a bond on the ballot, go back and look at your long range facility planning committee. Look at how many staff members for the ISD are on that committee, how many spouses of staff members, how many athletic and school spirit super involved individuals are on these committees, how many actual school board trustees are on these committees, and how many business owners who will benefit from a bond passing are on these committees. And more importantly than that, look who conducts and drives and runs the presentation that are given to these community members, to guide them, to drive them, to groom them to be overwhelmingly supportive of this massive debt.
If I can really quick call back to Jake's show when he was talking about FDR,
Yep.
This is exactly what FDR did when he couldn't get things passed through the Supreme Court, when the Supreme Court was like, yeah, that's clearly unconstitutional. Here, if we had an actual deck, a court of the people asking about this and overseeing all these bonds or bond proposals, we would not get such bloated bonds here.
Absolutely not.
And the school administrators, the jump in the 74.9% increase in school administrators, they know that.
Absolutely.
And so they pull a page out of FDR's playbook and decide they are going to stack the Supreme Court, if you will, much like FDR tried to do back in the 1930s and 40s. That's what they're trying to do here. They're trying to get a predetermined outcome, and they will, if there's 11 spots, they will make sure that 7 of them
Absolutely
are people that they know are going to be rock solid yes votes.
And if the school district needs a bond, so bad. The school district itself should drive these presentations without help from an architect and somebody. They should be able to make the case on what they need, why they need it, not those who get paid off if a bond passes. And just yesterday in Godly ISD, members of the community who wanted to just observe the process of a long range facility planning committee, and a local politician who this is going on in his city in his official capacity wanted to observe this, were not allowed and literally threatened to be trespassed and escorted off premises for wanting to observe on public property, the public's business that's going to drive hundreds of millions of dollars of spending of taxpayers' money. And they were not allowed that. So much starts with these long-range facility planning committees. And the bottom line is the school should drive this train. It should be open and as transparent as possible. And if you're on the long-range facility planning committee, or you have been on one, you should 100% ask yourself, why was I asked to be on this? And do a little bit of self-reflection and really look at it and say, are they just using me for my yes vote? Are they just using me to make my family and the community look better? Do they know that I care more about my social status? Do they know I care more about what varsity team my kid starts for? So therefore, I'm going to toe these lines. They really need to look at this. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would definitely agree with the fact that these administrators are looking for their yes votes because they have an idea in mind for what they want. And they know that they can't fully materialize it without getting a whole bunch of people in their corner. So they will corruptly choose those who are going to make the decisions. And government corruption happens at every level, from the local level to the school board to Austin to Washington D.C. and everywhere in between. And that's why people need to get involved even at the local level, and perhaps especially at the local level, so we can take our cities back, take our state back, and take our country back from all of these bureaucrats up and down the ballot, who are trying to make decisions with our money and for our lives.
And the reality is, the more that you hear, well, it's all about the kids. It's what's best for the kids. The more they use the children, or they use the threat of not as good of facilities, the more they use that to guilt you, the more leery you should be. Long-range facility planning committees always recommend a bond, and it's always a predetermined outcome. Here again, it's always led by these architects that have a financial interest. There's too much money to leave to chance for us, the citizens, to be to have the final say. It's always the intent of these long-range facility planning committees. And what they do is they recommend a bond, and the school board trustees vote to add a bond to the ballot. And then they have effectively been provided shade. Mm-hmm. They've been provided cover to say, well, we didn't want this necessarily. We just went with what our community said. And it creates this rigmarole of absolving responsibility and taking responsibility. We elected you to make these decisions. Don't throw it on a committee that you hand selected. But would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. Elected officials need to do what elected officials were sent to their positions to do, rather than abdicating all responsibility to a handful of unelected bureaucrats at the local level, state level, or federal level. It happens at every single level. And we as citizens have the most direct control over what happens here in our local community, here in Johnson County. And if you live within the city limits, then it's the city council that you have some level of control over what happens. If you live within the ISD, then you have a say in what goes on in that ISD. Whether or not you have kids in that ISD, they are taking your money. So you do have a say. And
we're responsible with the outcome. They're going to be leading our country. They're going to be running our businesses, leading our countries one day. So we definitely have a vested interest in it, and we're also paying for it.
Absolutely. And we need to make sure that our kids and their kids are not left with hundreds of millions of dollars of debt that they have to pay off through their tax dollars. And we need to make sure that money, because where does it actually come from immediately? In the long term, it comes from taxpayers.
Sure.
Immediately, it comes from investors in those bonds.
Yep.
Investors who would have otherwise invested in local businesses, small businesses, things that might be a little more risky to them, but they could spread that out amongst a lot more investments, a lot more of our kids who are coming out of high school and college wanting to start a small business. They could have access to that investment money, but instead we're pulling it out of their hands and saying, no, we want a bigger stadium. We want a
Career
CTE
technical
program.
education facility. We're going to get into
Yeah.
that. We got to save time for that. But these long range facility planning committees, once the school board trustees vote to add a bond to the ballot, these long range facility planning committees and a lot of ISD loyalists, these ones that deal in absolutes, they guilt the community. You hate kids. No, nobody hates kids. I'm sorry to say. We have a difference of opinion and maybe what is needed and my responsibility as a parent and the school district's responsibility. No, I don't hate teachers, but they'll say that we hate teachers. On the contrary, teachers should come first, and that's what we should fund first. And the one I love most, after Godley's bond was defeated, I was accused of supporting tornado attracting portables. If your district is dependent on a bond passing in a short period of a couple of months, and your classrooms are going to be so overcrowded you can't manage them, and you're going to have to go to 1,000 portables, maybe you should look in the mirror and say, how did I mismanage this ISD to get to the point to where this need is so great now? I have to play fear mongering to try to get the community to pass hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars in bonds. How do we get to that point? It's crazy how they do this. So the hate on kids, the hate on teachers, and the overcrowding and the portable argument, you should be able to logically, maturely discuss why you need this bond debt, not guilt people into either voting apathy or into supporting it. That's the wrong way to go about this.
Yeah. And, the thing that I said a couple minutes ago goes directly at the heart of the you hate kids argument. No, we're actually trying to set them up and the community up for a better future. And then secondly, for the teachers, we want to make sure there are more teachers and less administrators.
Yes.
Because that means our kids can have a better quality of education. Because if we can focus our teachers down and our schools down into teaching kids and not any of this other stuff that they're trying to do, then those kids will have a better educational outcome and those teachers will be successful in the job that they have. And then lastly, the overcrowding and things like that, that is not our fault as citizens, that it was so poorly managed. It is the fault of the administrators. And clearly, we've already established that there's way too many of them, that whether it's too many cooks in the kitchen making a terrible decision, or whether it's one or two making a terrible decision, that just shows us, okay, well, we need to overhaul our administration too.
You always see when the district wants to look like a good district, they say, look, our student to teacher ratio is 12 to 1, 13 to 1. And then when they want to look like they want to ask for and reach their hand deep in your pocket, they say our classroom size is 22, 25 to 1. You have certified teachers in your administration. Pull them out of administration, put them in a classroom and teach the kids. Give them the resources they need to do that specific task. Pull them out of the offices, creating these redundancies. So after this vote goes on and after this guilting goes on of the community, it's usually done through a PAC or an SPAC. So these will be stood up and the ISD loyalists, these absolutists, manage it. And what they do is an SPAC allows for you to take a proactive stance on something that's going to be voted on. Godly, theirs was Vote Yes Godly ISD Bond, and they ran a Facebook group called Friends of Godly ISD. Joshua's is called Elevate Joshua. Elevate Joshua is not Joshua ISD trying to do anything. This is a group of individuals that are taking donations to try to convince you and groom you into voting for this bond. Now, it's too early to see all the financials for Elevate, but let's look at Godly's last bond. Gallagher Construction, $1,000 donation. Yoris, I'm probably saying it wrong, General Contractors, $2,500 donation. Huckabee and Associates, that's the architect, $5,000 donations. Vote Yes Godly ISD Bond, the Friends of Godly ISD, who was doing massive amounts of videos, massive amounts of podcasts, using local pastors to push a bond through an SPAC, took 3 donations, bought a bunch of signs, and promoted this bond. This is not a grassroots effort. This is grassroots versus the bond. This is a bond machine. And this grassroots effort is being stamped out. So who's donating to the Elevate Joshua one? And we'll find out as it comes out. But are they representation of the community? Who knows? But they're definitely a pro bond thing. What do you think about these SPACs getting involved with school districts?
Well, the thing that I'll say every single time, follow the money. Where's the money coming from, and who stands to gain the most if this passes? All three of those large donors to this SPAC, they stood to gain millions of dollars if this passed. And the thing is, they didn't really care too much about whether it was Godly or whether it's in Joshua, whether it's somewhere else. They're putting this same amount into projects all over the state. This is their way of investing, of just going and saying, one of these school districts is going to be able to push this through, and we're going to get paid millions for it. So what's a few thousand here or there?
That's right.
Same thing when you look at federal politics. Where's the money come from? The political action committees. And it's very hard for someone like myself to break through with small dollar donations. So if we want to oppose stuff like this, we need to be better organized, and we need to be more passionate. We need to be going door to door. I mean, the one in Joshua right now, that's on the ballot. It's early voting season right now.
Right now. Get out and vote. Either way, get out and vote. You should get out and vote either way.
Yeah, absolutely. And, in Johnson County, you can vote anywhere in the county if you're voting early. So go to any polling location, preferably the one closest to your house. That's usually the one with the fewest problems. But go and vote early, get it out of the way so that the rain doesn't deter you on election day.
So we're gonna wrap up the show. We got about 6-7 minutes left. We're gonna talk about Joshua's bond specifically, but at the same time, this is very telltale of all bonds. There's two things that they push. One is the needed for repairs. Joshua is calling for close to 30 HVAC units that need to be replaced and 6 roofs that need to be replaced. School districts, you take a maintenance tax that has nothing to do with bond debt from taxpayers. If you're not capable of maintaining the facilities you already have, you have two choices. Change your leadership, or at the very least, come up with a very rock solid plan to show the taxpayers how you will not get into the same boat again. You can't maintain all this stuff on 30 years of financed bond debt because you failed to maintain it at that rate. That is not responsible stewardship of taxpayers' money. I'm still confused, but have been led to believe that they're actually going to be financing their deductibles for hail damage in some of the bonds, which is absolutely crazy. And then the other issue is career and technical education. Career and technical education is absolutely the new hotness. Everybody talks about career technical education. Well, everybody needs to familiarize themselves with Education Code Title II, Subtitle I, Chapter 48, Subchapter A, specifically 48.106. 48.106 of the Education Code allocates percentages of increased funding to students in certain classes of CTE. There's no extra money for a kid that's in advanced sciences, advanced math. However, a non-state approved CTE program, they get 10% more. Non-approved for a level 1 or level 2 CTE program, they receive 28% more per child. You want to talk about following the money? Level 3 and level 4, 47% more per child. Now, here's the kicker. Up to 47% more per child. They only have to use 55% of that in actual CTE. This is an absolute slush fund. You want to know why kids are being driven so hard in middle school to decide what they want to do for the rest of their lives? It's so the ISDs can slap a CTE label on them and receive up to 47% more funding. If that's responsible taxpayer money and bond debt, so be it. But CTE, while there's absolute value in some CTE, absolute value, it's narrowly focusing and it's pulling away from that core educational foundations that can potentially, if the child doesn't go down that track that he had to make a decision on in middle school, they're narrowing and closing doors potentially. 47% more only have to spend 55% of it, and they want to finance massive CTE facilities. What do you think about that?
Yeah, well, the thing is, all of this money is either coming from the state or it's coming from the local entity. And so somewhere there's a tax increase to pay for this.
Absolutely.
And if you haven't voted on the 14 Texas constitutional amendments, go read those, figure out where they want to send all of your money to, and where they want to tax you even more. The problem with a lot of this is you're trying to lock kids in. I didn't know what I wanted to do when I was in college. I studied mechanical engineering, and I did that just so I can keep as many doors open to me as possible. But a lot of these CTE programs, they're telling kids, get into this program. You don't have to take this extra math. You don't have to take this extra science class that everybody else has to take because you're in CTE. And then what happens if you don't complete that program? Well, you're either behind or you're dealing with thoughts of being a failure because this was the one career path that was chosen for you when you were 12. And I've talked with kids in the middle schools as I've gone around to speak with classrooms about the dangers of fentanyl, and a lot of those kids aren't ready to be making career decisions at 11 and 12 years old.
And when the school districts convince taxpayers to build to create the biggest and baddest buildings and make those CTE facilities godly wild, create a CTE, career technical education facility, and put it in a football stadium to avoid a football stadium bond. When you do things like that, kids are gravitated towards the shiny object. These are maturing children. They're not capable of making some of these more mature decisions. They don't understand the second and third order effects of these. And we as adults need to put our big boy pants on and make adult decisions. And we need to be responsible for how we guide and mentor these youth and not create a shiny object on 30 years of bond debt that funnels kids into it, because you're going to receive up to 47% more money and only have to spend 55% of it. How about using that other 45% to build your CTE facilities, ISDs? You ever think of that?
At the end of the day, there's corruption at every single level of government. And if we really had people who cared about the community, we wouldn't have schools that go under, schools that need hundreds of millions of dollars in debt in order to fund maintenance costs. We wouldn't have as big of a problem in this country at every level as we have if we actually had fiscally responsible individuals who gave a damn about the community that they're in.
Absolutely. And as we wind this show down, really need to scrutinize every cent that goes into this bond debt and make sure that they're not misusing this fund in a way that can create more of a financial windfall for them on the back end and misleading where our children are going. We're wrapping this up with Mr. Lucci. He's running for the Texas 25th House District. Lucci, Lucci 4FOR, Texas.com. Facebook, Matthew Lucci for Congress. We'll see you next week on The Breakdown. Thanks, Joko.
From Burleson to Venus and Grandview to Godley, this is the voice of Johnson County, Joko Community.